So listen, I wanted to share with y'all an earth-shattering secret that had been going on for 52 years. And apparently there were other people in on it that I didn't realize. After the pandemic, I found out that both of my parents are actually people, y'all. I had no idea, and it seems like they were in on it together. So that's the reason why I wanted to come and speak to everyone today, just to give a perspective that I was able to pick up after the pandemic and being with my parents, these two human beings that I've known for 52 years, just being able to be with them in a different way, right? And so the idea that our parents are human beings, they're people that before we came into their lives, they had their own problems, they had their own bills to pay, they had their own medical situations to deal with. And you know what? They may have had their own issues with their parents. So that gave me pause to think about how I relate to each of them. When I was growing up in the 1970s and 80s, I loved fantasy TV. Now, some of y'all are too young to know these things, but some of y'all aren't. My favorite television shows were The $6 Million Man. Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We can make him better. We can make him stronger. We can make him faster. The Incredible Hulk. Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. I love that. I used to love that stuff because it was a way for me to vicariously live out what I was experiencing living as a 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old in the San Francisco housing project that my mother and I lived in with my brother. After they divorced, my mom was a single mom. So I just love the idea that you could lean into something that wasn't you and be better than you thought you were. You could spin around and a ball of thunderous light would encase you and you would emerge as 6-foot Amazon. You can have a bionic fake leg and kick a door in. And all of those things that I loved about those shows growing up is that they all had origin stories, right? Steve Austin, a man barely alive. He's an astronaut. The ship that he was in crashes to Earth, and now they've got to replace his limbs. Lindsay Wagner was the bionic woman, the same thing. A lot of falls happen in these shows, by the way, where people... And her legs are replaced. Her ears replaced. I was just watching that the other night. Like, you guys got to watch this stuff. There was an episode where she has her limbs replaced, and he's crying, and he starts singing the theme song, "I'll Always Love You, Sweet Jamie." It's horrible. His voice is horrible. But I still watch that stuff, and it's still a way for me to escape even at this age. So growing up like that was a way to escape because I was so angry. When I think about it, who I was as a kid, I start shaking. And most of my anger was directed at my mother. She was there, right? Who else to bear the brunt of what I was experiencing? I think that's the thing that we do. The parent that's not there, we get to romanticize them while we take out our frustrations on the parent who is there taking care of us. I wanted my mother to be different. I wanted her to be faster, stronger, better, more ambitious, have more drive. And here we were living in public housing, and I didn't understand it because we had come from a middle-class area in Detroit before winding up there. So I was skipping school, y'all. I skipped 60 days of school one year and wound up with a C average. I skipped 60 days of school one year. I put a butter knife in my backpack and would pop the lock on the window in our public housing project apartment and stay inside all day and watch The Bionic Woman, $6 Million Man, Wonder Woman, I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, all of the things that made me feel like maybe I could escape one day and things could be better if I was like them. So my mom took me to a meeting with the principal about an alternative school, to which I said, I feel like if I got a C average and I skip 60 days, I'm good. I don't need an alternative school. She didn't agree. So being the adult that I thought I was at 11 years old and under the pressure of all of those things and under the pressure of what I wasn't telling my mother is that kids were chasing me home from school every day, calling me a faggot, asking me if I was half white, asking me if I was a girl. That's what I wasn't going to tell her, because superheroes don't bring their moms down. So one day, she came home and found me on the floor in the bathroom. I had overdosed on Tylenol and baby aspirin and whatever else I could get my hands on in the medicine cabinet. And in that moment is where things transformed for us, for me and for her. And I'm sharing this with you because it's that vulnerability, it's that willingness to surrender that once we tap into it, those things are what change relationships. And maybe some of you here have great relationships with your parents. Maybe some of you don't. But when you're able to surrender to vulnerability and be present, it can change the dynamic of any relationship. And my mom held my hand in that hospital bed and told me that when she was a girl, her father used to molest her. And suddenly everything shifted. Suddenly I started going to school. Suddenly I started doing the best that I could around the house. Suddenly I started showing up at my brother's parent-teacher conferences when she couldn't because she was working 3 jobs. I saw Susan as a human being. I saw Susan as a person. I saw Susan as someone who didn't owe me anything just because she gave birth to me. Right? So that is the power of being connected to other human beings, when you're willing to surrender to the truth of who you are and share that openly and honestly. The healing power of connection. That's what it was. Something about that conversation between the two of us that day healed a part of me. And I've always been grateful for that. And so I've seen the healing power of connection come to work with me as I work in a mental health facility in the Washington, D.C. area. You see, we need connection because right now, more than ever, particularly since the pandemic, there's an epidemic of loneliness. There's an epidemic of disconnection. There's an epidemic of isolation and misunderstanding. And the antidote to that is connection. But how do we access that? It's easy for me to stand before you and tell you, well, you need to be more connected to the people in your lives and everything would be great. But how do we access that? Well, I'll tell you, vulnerability and access to connection requires that you surrender. Requires that you surrender who you thought the person you're talking to was and give that up. Now, each of us in here has had different interactions with our parents, and I'm not saying that you don't have a right to be angry with whoever you're angry with or feel whatever you feel. No one in the world can tell you you don't have a right to feel the way that you feel. But I'm telling you that when you give up your right to be right, the whole world is going to change for you, just like the whole world changed for me. I could have been mad at my mother for the rest of my life, and I would have been right in a lot of respects, but I wouldn't have had the chance to have a relationship. And that's what connection is. It's getting out of your own way. It's surrendering. It's giving up your right to be right for the good of the relationships that are important to you in your life. And I think if we practice more of that, as a matter of fact, I know that in my work as a mental health clinician, if we practice more of that, the symptoms of loneliness would dissipate. Because in my work, the symptoms of the epidemic of loneliness are alcoholism. The symptoms of the epidemic of loneliness are fentanyl use, substance abuse, cocaine use, marijuana overuse. The symptoms of that are high rates of suicide. The symptoms of that are disconnection and depression. I know that firsthand. I was disconnected. I didn't have the language to speak what it was I was experiencing, right? So now we're older, we're adults, and if you'd like to have a different type of relationship with your family member or with your parents, it's time for you to be the $6 million man. It's time for you to spin around and to create your own gold ball of light and be somebody else in order to get it done. It's time for you to put your cape on and reach out to whoever it is you have an issue with. And I will tell you that doesn't mean you're absolving whoever has hurt you from whatever pain that they've caused you. I watched my mother clip her father's toenails because he was diabetic and ill. And I asked her how and where she got the wherewithal to do that. And she said to me, I don't do that for him. I do that for you. Because if I had succumbed to what he did to me, you wouldn't have a mother. That's the power of connection. That's the power of letting it go. That's the power of surrender. "20 and 21 years old, married, 30-something. Look at the look on my face. It basically summarizes our whole relationship, right? And this was in 2018, and this was in 2022. So that's what connection can do. It can create a relationship or heal a relationship or mend things to the point where you don't stop here when you're upset with somebody. Because this is where I was when I tried to take my life by suicide. And this is where I was in 2022. And again, you can see by the look on my face, the type of relationship that we have. So where do we go from here? What does connection require? It requires vulnerability, as I mentioned. It requires surrendering. It requires giving up your right to be right. And again, you have a right to feel however you feel. But that right is keeping you, it's blocking you, it may be blocking you from the blessing of being with the persons who you care about the most. And not just your parents. This can be applied to anybody. So when we're in the workplace and we're facing things, racial microaggressions, which many of us have experienced, sexual harassment, which many of us have experienced, being looked over for positions like many of us have experienced, consider the idea that your right to feel the way that you feel might be blocking you from advancing, maybe not with that person, but creating relationships with other people to get your need met. That's what I wanted to talk to you about today. I want everybody in this room to know there is nothing special about Bernard Owens. Nothing. There's nothing special about me at all. There's something unique about me. And there's something unique about you, and something unique about you, and you, and you. And that is what you're going to tap into to create these types of connections. So you don't stop here at 11 years old and try to end your life. You keep moving forward because you took the time to surrender and be connected to the people in your lives that mean the most to you. And that's what's going to change the world. So maybe there are no superheroes. Maybe there are. I'd like to believe that there are. I'd like to believe, as I told my dad the last time we were together, that a massive dose of gamma radiation changed David Banner into the Incredible Hulk. To which he said, well, let's watch that other show you like. So I put on Wonder Woman, and his response was, well, no, if she's a superhero, how come she starts off in heels and then be in flats whenever she chases somebody down? To which I said, let's see if we can't get you an Uber back to your house. So, there it is. You're going to make the decision to do what it is you need to do. But I'm telling you, in creating connections with people and getting to understand their origin story, to go back to the superhero theme, you get to understand who they are. And it doesn't mean you absolve them. It doesn't mean you forgive them. It doesn't mean you overlook what has happened to you. But it does mean you now have a different understanding when you look at them. And now you got a better understanding of yourself. Now you got a better understanding of how you might be showing up in the workplace. Now you got a better understanding as to why romantic relationships might not be working the way you want them to work. Not because anybody is at fault, but because you've been viewing things through a certain lens. So forgiving and finding understanding and compassion and empathy and surrendering is not about them. Ultimately, it's about enhancing your life. It's about saving your life. Today is September 16th, 2023. And 1 week from today will be the 1-year anniversary. Will be the 1-year anniversary of my mother's passing. I sat on the floor next to her with my hand up on the bed the entire time until she passed away. And I want to tell you the reason why I'm here is because I want you to have this beautiful gift of being present with somebody who you almost gave up on. It's a gift. But if you're stuck in the sense that you're right about everything, you're going to miss out on that gift. And that's fine too. But don't say that it's because the other person was a horrible person. Yeah, people can be horrible, but until you understand the origin story of that horrible person, whether you're in their life or not, doesn't mean you have to be in their life, but at least try to understand them in a different way. So when they pass away, you can be holding their hand and not 500 miles away in DC, which is where I was living. I want this for you. But you got to want it for yourself. You got to be the superhero now. Maybe there are no superheroes. Or maybe it's time for you to put on your cape, pull up your boots, and call your mother. Maybe it's time for you to lift your feet up off the ground and defy the gravity of expectations that you've placed on other people and overcome the pull of the past. Maybe it's time for you to fly. Thank you.